Hello and welcome to this video on topic 2, examining relationships between variables. This is part 2 of this topic, where we cover the CtoQ case, that is, a categorical variable to a quantitative variable. If you have not seen part 1 of this particular topic, please go back and look at that now. So in this particular video, we're going to be looking at the case where we have a categorical explanatory variable and a quantitative response variable. So this corresponds to this corner of the table that we saw in the previous video. In this case, the way we will explore and examine the data is by using side-by-side box plots to look at the relationship between the categories and the quantities. So let's do an example from a previous homework problem where we looked at a data set, salaries by major, that had data on academic majors and salaries. In a previous homework assignment, you were asked to create a single box plot of these data. But now we're going to look at side-by-side box plots in order to look at the relationships that emerge. Here is a picture of what the data look like in StatCrunch. You'll notice that we have two columns. Our first variable is major, and you can see that there are different categories of majors that are possible, including management, finance, accounting, information systems. Also, we have a second variable, monthly salary, which corresponds to the average monthly salary of a particular person with a corresponding major. So if we look at the explanatory variable, we first want to ask which one of these two explains the other or is more likely to explain the other. Here it would make sense to look at the relationship between these two variables by asking the question, does a person's major determine what their monthly salary will be on average? So essentially, we would say that the explanatory variable here is the major. And because that particular variable has several different categories in which a person may fall, the explanatory variable then is categorical. It is certainly not quantitative because there are no quantities involved or associated with this variable. Likewise, the response variable, the variable that responds to the explanatory variable, is the monthly salary. And that, of course, is a quantitative variable. So here in this situation, we do indeed have a case where we're going from C to Q, or categorical to quantitative. For each category, what we can do then is create a box plot that shows salary data for that category. In StatCrunch then, we would simply group by the appropriate variable. So here what we're doing here is we're going into the menu that allows us to create a box plot, and then we're going to select the monthly salary quantitative variable, because of course box plots need quantitative variables in order to be generated. And then we're simply going to group by major. And what this does is it creates a separate box plot for each major. So that's what the group by major selection does right here. So every single major will have its own box plot, and every box plot will tell you about the monthly salary of that particular major. When we do this, we get the following. We get 5 box plots corresponding to the 5 possible values or categories that are associated with the major variable. Here are the 5 possible categories. We also can see that on the horizontal axis we see categories, on the vertical axis here we see quantities. So this is a visual representation of the relationship between a particular category and a quantity. And this is actually very useful. You can see what's happening here is very interesting. You can see here that the management majors tend to have the lowest median salary income. On the other hand, it looks like either the information systems majors or the accounting majors have the highest median salary. So this is a nice representation of these two variables that allows us to see different relationships. So this is the visual representation we'll use in the C-to-Q case, categories to quantities. We can also complement this picture with some summary statistics. So I've used the summary statistics command in StatCrunch to generate this table of summary statistics for each major. So by grouping by major, we can see not only how many particular observations we have for each major, but we can also see the important summary statistics like the mean, the median, and so on. We can ask the question, how are these numbers linked to the graph? So, for example, if we were to look at, for example, the median column, we can see that the major that has the lowest median income is right here, management. And so that's what we actually saw on the previous slide. If we go back, we'll see that the smallest or the lowest median income happens in the management category, and it's denoted by this line right here. So this is the number that we see in this table here. 3,155 corresponds to this line right here. Also, let's go back to the tables for a second. Let's look at the third quartile for each of these. And let's take a look at the smallest third quartile value, which once again is for management majors. So notice that the third quartile is actually lower than the first quartile for both accounting majors and for information systems management majors. So keep in mind, the third quartile on a box plot and the first quartile on the box plot are basically the edges of the boxes. So let's go back to the previous graph and look at this. Remember, we're looking at third quartile for management versus first quartile. So when we go back, the third quartile for management is up here. So only 25% of management majors make more than this. So that is the third quartile. However, you can see that the first quartile for information systems majors and for accounting majors is higher than that. So that's telling you that here this group of majors right here, which represents the 25th percentile to the 50th percentile, that group on average is making more than this third quartile of management majors. This combination of looking at the visual pictures and then going back and looking at the numbers is a great way to think about the relationship between categorical variables and quantitative variables. When we're exploring the relationship between a categorical explanatory variable and a quantitative response variable, we basically want to compare the distributions of the quantitative response for each category of the explanatory variable using side-by-side box plots, and then we supplement by descriptive statistics. Previously in the course, we actually did this when we argued that box plots are the most useful when presented side by side for comparing distributions of two or more groups. So that's all we're doing here. So a quick summary, if we go back to our table, notice that we have 4 different possibilities, and the one that we are working with here, the categorical to the quantitative, we can now summarize by saying the way we want to analyze these data are through side-by-side box plots and through summary statistics. As we make our way through the rest of this particular course, we'll figure out how to explore data that are in this category and then data that are in this category. Remember, we don't cover the Q to C course, the Q to C case in this course. So that's the end of this video. In the next video, we'll look at, so that does it for this particular video. In future videos, we'll look at other possible combinations in our role type classification scheme.